Welcome or welcome back to my channel and welcome to the top 24 books of 2024. Honestly, I've been putting off doing this video just because it was so hard to decide my top 24 books of the year because I read so many good books this year, and I finished off the year reading 122 books, which is the most books I've ever read in a year. That's a crazy amount, but we're going to start at the bottom, and then the last book I'm going to talk about is going to be my favorite book of the year. I also decided not to include any nonfiction books and no rereads, and I also decided to only include one book from each series. That way I wasn't talking about the same series multiple times. So buckle in, grab a snack. Hopefully this won't be a super long video because I'm going to try to not yap for too long, but 24 books is a lot to talk about. So let's start with the 24th ranked book, which is A Little Life. And I honestly debated on if I was going to even talk about this book or not, because if you know this book at all, you know it's very heart-wrenching, it's very triggering. You definitely need to check the trigger warnings. It talks about a lot of heavy topics, but it also does it in such a beautiful way. I just highly recommend, if you are thinking about reading this book, to read it when you are in a good state of mind and to check the trigger warnings before reading it. Even I had to take a couple breaks while reading this book because it is so heart-wrenching. But you're basically following a group of young boys, I think it's from college on, and they're literally like the best of friends. And you follow one of the characters the most. You just basically do a deep dive into all of these characters and their lives, but the writing was absolutely stunning. And then I have The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna, and I honestly recommend checking the trigger warnings on this book as well. Kristen Hanna is an author that I absolutely fell in love with this year, and a lot of her books are very heavy. They're very sad. Do I like sad books? I've just realized that I just talked about two sad books back to back. But this one follows a family and they decide to up and leave to Alaska. They're kind of a little bit like nomads, like they've moved around a lot, but they decide one day that they want to move to Alaska, and so they do, and you just follow their life on Alaska, and especially through like the hard winters and just how different life is in Alaska. And this is set, I believe, right after Vietnam War, I want to say. So the dad also kind of had some struggles because he was in the Vietnam War. It is a very beautiful story, and I still think about this book to this day, and just like living on Alaska. And I feel like that is such a hard topic to write about because I mean, I don't think Kristen Hanna's ever lived in Alaska right after the Vietnam War, so I'm sure that that had to have a lot of research behind it. I also feel like because of Kristen Hanna, I really fell in love with historical fiction this year, and this was just one of my favorite historical fiction reads from the year. And then I also read Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. This was in a reading vlog, and you can see in that reading vlog my emotions were like this. Like, it was like a roller coaster, and even when I finished the book, I was even saying like I could not decide my feelings on this book like at all, because I hated the twist, but then also at the same time I couldn't stop thinking about the book, and just the way that everything was set up was so genius. But basically this is a thriller about a young girl who loses her dad, and when her dad passes, this house that they used to live in was given to her. But the twist is she thought that they sold this house. She didn't think that they owned the house anymore because a lot of crazy things happened to her and her family in this house, and her dad wrote a book about all these crazy things that happened in this house. And so of course, with the passing of her dad and her realizing they still own this house, she goes back to the house, and then things start to happen all over again. It is so good, and I'm telling you, you will not guess the twist in this book. I certainly did not, and I cannot stop thinking about it. My next read is kind of more of a lighthearted read. I have The Perfect Couple by Ellen Hildebrand, which also got turned into a TV show this year. If you're unaware of Ellen Hildebrand's writing, all of her books take place on Nantucket, and they are so magical. They are the perfect summer reads, which feels weird to talk about a summer read in January, but her writing is just so good, and she always transports me to Nantucket when I'm reading her books. But this book specifically follows a mystery. I feel like a lot of her books have some type of mysterious tone to them, but with this book, a family is about to have their wedding on Nantucket, but the morning of, the maid of honor is found dead, and so now everyone is a suspect. No one knows what happened, no one knows who did it, so you follow the police chief and just a bunch of other people as they try to figure out what happened to this girl, and then you also kind of follow what's happened way before the wedding. Very interested read, a little bit more lighthearted even though someone literally shows up dead. It's a very, very good read, and I highly recommend reading the book before you watch the show, especially because there's a good amount that's different in the book than the show. There's not like a crazy ton amount, but there's enough for it to be notable. And then I read Anxious People. This was actually my first book from this author, and I absolutely ate it up. This is another book that has a TV show. This TV show is on Netflix. I think it's a Netflix original. Oh wait, I think these were Netflix originals. I'm not sure. But the loose premise of this book is that there is an apartment showing, but then things turn south and the apartment showing becomes a hostage situation. But it's so much more than that because you take a deep dive into all of the characters and their backgrounds, and there is a little bit of a twist at the end, which I was shocked by, and highly recommend reading the book before watching the TV show, because also I think the book is a million times better than the TV show in this instance. And then I actually listened to None of This Is True. I have a couple audiobooks on this list, but most of these books I've physically read, but this one I listened to the audio because I kept seeing so many people saying that they loved this book on audio. And it actually makes perfect sense as an audio because this is about two people who are doing a podcast, but one of them is like the podcaster and the other one just met this podcaster in the bathroom randomly one day and only started talking to her because they share the same birthday. So she says to her, hey, like, I have a crazy story for your podcast. You're gonna want this on your podcast. And it does end up kind of crazy. It was actually really good to listen to. I love going on the hunt for a good audiobook, and this was one of them. So if you need a good listen, I highly recommend this one on audio, but it would definitely be good to actually physically read as well. And then I read Made in Manhattan. This is more of a lighthearted romance. It's set in New York City, obviously, Manhattan, but I feel like this book is so slept on. You're following our two main characters. One is only in New York to kind of take over this company, and our main girl character works for the company, but she's more of like a family friend because she has a lot of money. She's not like really working for them, but she does not want this new guy to come in. He kind of doesn't really understand like the New York scene, doesn't understand the big business kind of side of things, so there's a little bit of tension there, and then things progress. This was such a good romance though. I actually loved this, and it took me by such a surprise because I did not think that I would love this book as much as I did. And then I also read The Devil Wears Prada, which I'm shocked that it made it this high onto this list because while I was reading this book I was like, oh, this book is so annoying, I can't believe this boss behaves this way, but I could not stop thinking about this book. It is so good. This basically follows a girl who is straight out of college, and I feel like maybe that's part of the reason why I liked this book because I connected with her. She just kind of was like a little bit lost, didn't really know what she wanted to do in her life, and like I said, fresh out of college, which was me. I graduated literally a year ago in December, but she gets kind of a high profile, high sought after job at this magazine, and she is an assistant. But everyone says after 2 years, or maybe it's 1 year, as an assistant, you can basically go anywhere in the company because she's the chief editor's assistant or something like that. She's like someone very high up's assistant, but her boss is very out there. She's very demanding, very controlling, and it is rough. I don't think I could last a year at this job. Definitely not. This is also a movie, so I feel like a lot of people have seen the movie, but not a lot of people know that it's a book. And it's also a series. I only read this book in the series this year, but I hopefully will get to more of this series in 2025. Oh my gosh, that sounds so crazy to say. I'm actually about to talk about 2 more audiobooks back to back, and then I think that I'm done talking about audiobooks. So the first one I'm going to talk about is The Guncle, and obviously with both of these I recommend the audio and the physical copy. Obviously, I just want to say that I listened to the audio because the narrators in both of these books were perfect. I feel like they added to the book. They just made the book even better, even though the book is already so good. So this is The Guncle. This follows a gay uncle. I always feel silly saying that, but I feel like I need to explain what guncle means. I don't know why. You follow him, I think his name is Patrick, or maybe that's the kid name. I actually can't remember, but something tragic happens in the beginning, and so the guncle has to start watching his cousins, no, not cousins, his brother's kids, nieces and nephew, whatever, that little detail does not matter. He has to start watching them because there was a death in the family. The dad had to go to rehab, so he starts watching the kids, and he kind of teaches the kids a lot of life lessons, and then obviously also the kids are dealing with this grief that they have. So the book manages to talk about so many heavy topics, but also do it in a lighthearted and engaging way, and I really appreciated that. The author actually narrates this book, and he did an amazing job. Like, he needs a gold star and a raise. He did so good. And then the other audiobook that I was talking about is Finley Donovan is Killing It. I really enjoyed this book as well. This is an entire series, and I listened to the entire series this year. It was so good. This book is kind of like a rom-com meets mystery kind of situation, but the loose premise is that our main character is an author, and she meets with her publicist or her editor, something like that, in a Panera Bread, and she is telling her editor about her book when the person sitting next to them thinks that it's real life and tries to hire her as a hitwoman. And then obviously things snowball from there. It gets a little wild, it gets a little mysterious, a little rom-com-y. It was perfect. And then we have Magnolia Parks. I only read the first 2 books in the series. I actually love Magnolia, and I eat up the Magnolia and BJ situation so much because I love Gossip Girl, and this reminds me so much of Gossip Girl. This is literally like Gossip Girl set in England. I love it so much. But if you want to read this book, do not go into it expecting a happy, cute little romance. It is a toxic romance situation, and I 100% think that knowing that helped me go into this book and helped me enjoy this book more, because I heard people comparing it to Gossip Girl and warning me that it was a toxic relationship. Because if you go into this book thinking it's going to be a cute little romance, I feel like you're going to be put down just so fast, because it is not. It is toxic. But you follow BJ and Magnolia in this one, and their very messy relationship. But it's so entertaining, it's so good. They're also just rich London socialites, and I love that. I love reading about rich people, especially in London or in New York City. London and New York City, those 2 settings, slay. Amazing. And then the next book, I wrote down Queen of Shadows, but really it's the entire Throne of Glass series minus Kingdom of Ash. Me and Kingdom of Ash are going to go outside and have a little heated discussion. But I think Queen of Shadows might have been my favorite from the series. I don't know, because I also really loved doing the tandem read. But overall, the series was so good. If you don't know what the series is about, you follow an assassin, and in the first book, she gets taken from her prison camp situation and gets put into a competition to become the king's assassin and work for the king, and then you go from there. But kind of like I alluded to, I really did not enjoy the last book of the series. It's almost 1,000 pages long. I can't keep going. I was going to say something else, but I don't want to spoil the entire series, so I can't say that. But I have some critiques that happened in the book. But if you've read the books and you want to know my in-depth critiques, I do have spoiler vlogs of me reading these books. I will link them below. Next is a novel love story, which I'm actually a little bit surprised that this ended up so high on my list. But the more I think about this book, the more I like it. And I just feel like this specific niche genre is for me, and Ashley Poston writes this genre so good. The 7 Year Slip by Ashley Poston was my favorite book of 2023, and this book was so good as well. It just was not as good as 7 Year Slip. Basically, our main character gets transported into her favorite fictional world, and I love that so much. There's also a little bit of romance in here. It was just the perfect amount of romance and magical realism. Is that what that's called? Magical realism? I think so. My brain is not with me today. And then from here on out, the rest of the books I'm going to talk about are all 5-star books, which I'm actually shocked that I had 11 5-star books this year. I had no idea until I was sitting down to plan out the books for this video. But my first 5-star book of the year was actually Iron Flame. Now listen, I feel like some of you are gonna judge me for this one, and I just want to say there are some cringy parts in this book. I'm not gonna lie. Was the writing absolutely 100% amazing all of the time? No. But there was something about this book, I just ate it up, and I couldn't stop thinking about it after. I don't know what it is. Now, if you don't know what this book is, this is actually the second book in a series, so I don't want to tell you exactly what this book is about because I don't want to spoil anything. The first book is Fourth Wing, which went absolutely crazy. I think that was in 2024. No. I think that went crazy in 2023 because this came out in 2024. But it's basically about this girl who goes through this school, and you have to go through like a bunch of trials to get through this school. I can't remember what they call them, but it has dragons in it. It's a fantasy. It's very good if you ask me. Obviously, I think it's very good. It was my 11th ranked book of the year, but I highly recommend this book if you like fantasy, if you like dragons, if you like all of that. It is a romantasy. I think there's more of the romance elements in this book than in the first book, if I remember correctly, but I do really like this, and I'm very excited for the next book to come out in January. Next, we have Beach Read by Queen Emily Henry. I feel like it would not be one of these videos without an Emily Henry book. I just love the way that she writes. This one specifically follows 2 authors, which sometimes is very hit or miss for me because I find it a little bit difficult to read about bookish people in books because sometimes I feel like that takes me out of the story. Obviously, this book did not do that for me. Also, though, I'm confused because they're at a lake. Where does the beach come in? I'm confused about that. If someone can let me know in the comments because I don't understand that part. But you have your 2 authors, and they both think that they can write the other person's genre better than the other person can write the other genre. I don't think that makes sense, but they basically switch genres to write. It's kind of enemies to lovers, it's second chance romance, I'm pretty sure. Is it dual point of view? I can't remember, and I don't have the physical book to look. I borrowed this from the library. I also borrowed the next book from the library. This is Powerless by Warren Roberts, and I cannot believe it took me this long to read this book. I actually read this at the beginning of December. Wow, it is so good. This is another romantasy, and again, I'm shocked that this is that high up on this list because I don't often love romantasies. I feel like they're kind of harder for me to get into. Sometimes I find it a little bit cringy, just depends on the book. The main character in this book is actually living on the streets and she goes to pickpocket someone and then she ends up saving that someone, which causes her to have to go into these giant trials, and so you follow her through the trials. I honestly recommend going into this book as blind as possible because that's what I did and I feel like that was really beneficial and I ended up loving it. Then the next book on my list is Little Bee. I feel like this book is actually the most different book out of all of the books that I'm going to talk about, and you get very little information about this book. Like, you have a tiny little paragraph on the back of the book and that's it. I'm actually going to read you the paragraph because I feel like that's all you should know about this book before going into it. It says, "We don't want to tell you what happens in this book. It is truly a special story and we don't want to spoil it. Nevertheless, you need to know enough to buy it, so we'll just say this. This is a story of two women. Their lives collide one fateful day and one of them has to make a terrible choice. The kind of choice we hope you never have to face. 2 years later, they meet again. The story starts there. Once you read it, you'll want to tell your friends about it. When you do, please don't tell them what happens. The magic is how the story unfolds." 100% agree. I feel like that is all you need to know about this book, and I'm actually very glad that they did that in the back of the book. It was beautiful. Highly recommend. Also, I think that book was literary fiction. I think Rain 7th is As Good as Dead by Holly Jackson. This is the final book in the Good Girls Guide to Murder trilogy, and it was honestly my favorite book in the trilogy. I loved the whole trilogy so much, obviously, but this book, oh my goodness, I have a very vivid memory of staying up until like 1 or 2 in the morning when I had to work the next day reading this book because it was so good. I actually could not put this book down. You could not pry this book from my hands when I was reading it. I can't tell you specifically what this book is about, but the first book follows our main character who is doing her capstone project, and she decides to look into the Andy Bell case because the way that the case was closed just did not sit right with our main character, and so she decides to start looking into the case, and she basically just plays detective. It is very good. I actually love books that do that, but then things kind of progress throughout the trilogy, and this book, she's not so much as trying to solve a case in this one. I mean, I guess a little bit, but you just have to read it and see. And then I have another surprising book. This is 28 Summers by Ellen Hildebrand. You already know I love Ellen Hildebrand. I've already talked about her in this video, but this book is surprising because there is so much cheating that happens in this book, and I hate cheating in books. Cheating in general is just not okay, so I feel like cheating in books is very, very hard to pull off, at least for me to like them, because I never want the cheating to come off as a good thing. Ugh, which makes it so hard that I liked this book so much. I'm sorry if there's an angle change. My camera died, so it cut me off, which means that I've been yapping for way too long, but I think I was basically just saying that the main characters in this book meet every single year, same weekend for 28 years, but one of the characters is married, which is what makes it so hard for me to like this book, but I did. I loved it. It was so good. This might actually take the cake for my favorite Ellen Hildebrand book so far because it was just so good. I don't know how she managed to do that because, like I said, I normally hate books that deal with any type of cheating, but I actually really liked that one. Next we have Carnegie's Maid, which is a historical fiction. Like I said, I fell back in love with historical fiction this year, but in this book we have our main character, which I believe she is coming to America from Ireland, but she gets off the boat and literally has nothing to her name, but then all of a sudden she hears someone calling her name, so obviously she's gonna go with them. She already has nothing. Like, what is she gonna lose? Which ends up leading her to becoming a maid for the Carnegie household, and then things progress from there. I feel like that is all you need to know because that's all I knew going into this book, and it was so good. I feel like I probably said good 1.5 million times in this video, but it's true. All of these books are good. Next I read Divine Rivals, which obviously is one of my favorite fantasies of all time, but also of this year. In this fantasy, our two main characters are writing to each other through magical typewriters, which is so cool. I also just have a connection to typewriters because I used to type on a typewriter just like for fun, which I feel like just makes this book 1,000,000 times better. It's rivals to lovers. I was gonna call this one enemies to lovers, but no, it's rivals to lovers. There's also a war going on, so you have that aspect of it too. I feel like it wasn't too romancy, but you still got that romance element in it as well. This is also a duology. We have now made it to top 3 territory, starting with The Therapist. I feel like if you were watching my channel when I discovered this book this year, you know I could not stop talking about this book. I literally talked about it all the time. The plot twist in this book got me. I did not expect it coming at all. I have had everyone in my life read this book because I love it so much. But basically our main character moves into this neighborhood and she kind of throws like this little welcoming party, but she can kind of tell that things are a little bit off, that there's something that's being kept from her, and she discovers what it is, but then even more happens after that. Right when you think it's done, bam. Something else happens. And then my top 2 books from this year were historical fictions. I didn't realize that until just now. Historical fiction is so good. Don't knock it till you try it. Also, my cat is rubbing his head on the camera right now. That's why it's moving. Hey, Buddy, hey. Okay. Oh no! First up we have Fifth Avenue Glamour Girl, which actually follows Estee Lauder and one of her friends. I don't think the friend part is true historically, but the Estee Lauder story I believe is true. It's also set in New York City. I loved this book. I have this weird connection with Estee Lauder. I love books that are set in New York City, and like I said, I love historical fictions. So I ate this book up. I loved it so much. And then for my favorite book of the year, I feel like if you've been here all year, you would be able to guess what this book is. This is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. We're following two sisters that live in France during World War II, and they both have very different lives and they do different things throughout the war. And so it was very interesting to follow both of them. And I also feel like I haven't read a lot of World War II historical fiction books where they Levi, please. And I also feel like I haven't read a lot of historical fiction World War II books where they follow two sisters like they do in this book and the role women can have in these wars. This was absolutely beautiful. It was so amazing, and I feel like I will think about this book for the rest of my life. And that was all of my top 24 books from 2024. I cannot believe we're already in 2025. Another reading year awaits us. Let me know what your favorite books of 2024 were. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!